This is Democracy Watch. Mark, just a few days ago, we found out the surprise good news from Virginia Democrats that they were moving forward with a map redraw of their own to neuter or counteract what Republicans have done in Texas and Missouri and North Carolina. Now Republicans have stood up and started to fight back with one move in particular. Can you explain what they've just done in court?
Yeah, Brian, it's always something with these guys, right? A group of Virginia Republicans, they filed a lawsuit that is trying to block this redraw. Specifically, what they are saying is that that the Speaker of the state House there does not have the power to essentially use the existing special session, right? So there was already a special session called by the governor, Glenn Youngkin, last year, but it was never completely ended, right? It was adjourned, but not concluded. And so the plan for Democrats was to reconvene this session and then pass a law that would, or a constitutional amendment that would undo the current constitutional requirement for a nonpartisan map. Now, they'd have to do that in two different legislative sessions, once now, and then presumably again in the beginning of the year, and then it would go on the ballot. Then it would go on the ballot in probably in April for a vote. But all of this was premised on the idea that the first of these two sessions in which this would pass the legislature, right, once this year, one next year, would be this remnant special session. And what Republicans are saying, and I think they're wrong about that, and we can get into this, is that essentially Democrats don't have the authority to reconvene this, that the Speaker doesn't have that power. I think this is a long shot on the part of the Republicans that speaks more to their desperation than it speaks to the legal merit. And honestly, Brian, it reminds me a lot about what you and I have talked about before, which were similar lawsuits that were filed in California. You know, people have not paid attention to this as closely as you and I have, and the readers of Democracy Docket and the people who subscribe to this channel, which if you're not already one of them, hit the subscribe button. But, you know, we talked about the fact that Republicans went to the state Supreme Court of California twice. Twice they lost there. Then, as you and I more recently talked about, Ronnie Jackson, the Republican congressman from Texas, went to a very conservative judge in Texas to try to stop the California ballot initiative. That failed as well. And so, you know, I would kind of put this in that vein.
Right, of these last grasp lawsuits being put forward that almost feel doomed from the start. So I guess that raises the obvious question here. What's your take on whether or not they're going to be successful? I understand that you believe that they won't be, and so why is that?
Yeah, so look, their argument by these Republican state lawmakers and one citizen on the Redistricting Commission, you know, says that essentially only the governor, not the Speaker of the House, can convene or expand the scope of a special session. I just don't think that's correct. I think if you look at the plain text of the rules and law, like that just isn't correct. Now, you know, I don't want to make too much of this, but it is noteworthy that the lawsuit was not filed in Richmond, where one might imagine this would be filed. It was not filed, you know, in Northern Virginia or in any of the population centers. It was filed in Tazewell County, which I will tell you, I live in Virginia. I had to look up Tazewell County. It is a relatively small, very rural county in the south western part of the state, bordering, I think, West Virginia.
So I mean, wonder what the rationale for that could be.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, again, there's not a knock on, you know, Tazewell County or its judiciary. I do think, though, it betrays probably a little less confidence on the part of the Republicans that they have a meritorious claim here. I think if they thought that they were going to win this claim, you know, the most logical thing would have been to bring it in Richmond, which, by the way, would not have been a terrible draw for Republicans, right? I mean, like it's a pretty balanced bench in Richmond. I've litigated there, you know, because you'd be in the seat of the seat of government, and then presumably en route to, you know, the state Supreme Court. This looks a little bit more like they are, you know, I think safe to say they didn't stumble across Tazewell County as the most logical place to bring a lawsuit. It probably reflects what they think about the merits.
Is there some rule precluding them from bringing a lawsuit in a place that they're kind of figuring out which would have the best judiciary or the best jury pool for them? Like, do they have standing to bring this case that would presumably take place in Richmond, because that's where the session itself is taking place, and so one would assume that would be the proper venue for this. Is there some way to challenge the fact that they've just tried to kind of cherry pick a venue here that would be more favorable?
Yeah, look, I think that's the first thing the court is going to have to sort out, and there may be venue issues or jurisdiction issues about where they chose. I don't know. As I sit here, this lawsuit, I mean, this is for people who are looking for breaking news. Okay. Like, this is breaking news. Like, you go search legacy media and try to find anyone covering this. I mean, this could be the biggest story in democracy going on right now, because, what's happening in Virginia here could affect 3-4 congressional seats. That is almost as big as the shift would be in Texas or in California. And yet legacy media, they're doing their own thing. They're ignoring this. But Brian, has had me on to talk about a lot of important stories, including this one. So like I said before, please subscribe to this channel. But that's going to get sorted out, this issue of jurisdiction. But in some ways, I think it matters a little less, because this case is clearly going to go up the courts wherever it originates. But I suspect, there may be at some point in the near future, either motions or the court itself will have to figure out whether this is really the right courthouse for this case, or whether there's more efficiency and economy if this is brought in Richmond.
I should note for folks watching right now, if you're getting your news from legacy media, Democracy Docket, which is the news outlet Mark founded to focus on everything voting and elections, was the first, and as far as I know, only outlet to cover this story. So if you want to support independent media that's actually focusing on stories that are at the forefront of this fight for democracy, please, if you're not yet signed up, sign up for Democracy Docket. I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I use it on a daily basis. It is how I sort through what's happening as it relates to all things democracy. Mark, you had alluded to this before, but can you talk about the lay of the land as it relates to Virginia and what Democrats might be able to net if they're able to overcome this challenge, this misguided challenge by Republicans?
Yeah, so look, Virginia is a critical state in this fight because it has 11 seats, but 5 of them are held by Republicans. I mean, look, I came out publicly against the redistricting reform that led to this map. I came out against the map that was drawn by the special masters, the 2 people who implemented this reform, because there is no way that Virginia is a 6-5 state. I mean, the fact is it has 2 Democratic senators. It votes overwhelmingly for president. For Democrats. It currently has a Republican governor, but that was a weird election. It has in recent years had mostly Democratic governors, mostly Democratic statewide officials. It's about to elect in a landslide a new Democratic governor. So, Virginia is not really even a purple state. It is not as blue as New York or California, but it's pretty damn blue. And yet it has this evenly divided delegation. And I think most people would say that if you redrew the map as a fair map, okay, not without any partisan considerations. This was my argument at the time. If you were to draw a fair map, it would either be 7-4 or 8-3. Okay, so that's probably like a baseline what a map should look like. But if Democrats are able to draw the map, and you know me, I think the term you invented is redistricting maximalist. Is that the term?
Yeah.
Okay, so I am a redistricting maximalist. So look, I think that people who are less maximalist than I am would say that Democrats will easily gain 3 seats here, could, without much of a sweat, gain 4 seats here. It is probably very difficult to do all 5 seats. So it's an either 3 or 4 seat gain for Democrats. And that will really be, frankly, the question of how many Democrats Northern Virginia wants to give up. In other words, how many Democratic voters? In other words, the northern counties of Virginia, Loudoun County, Arlington County, Fairfax County are wildly, overwhelmingly Democratic. And, the question is how much those elected officials or how much the legislature in redrawing the map is willing to sort of move the districts to accommodate more Democratic seats. So 3, I would say, would be a fair map that could have been drawn on a nonpartisan basis. 4 seats would be a partisan map, and I'm in favor of it. And we'll just see where it winds up there.
And I would be in favor of 4 as well, because the whole point here is to counteract what is a blatant Republican power grab. Again, Republicans, A, had the opportunity to sign on to national legislation that would allow for independent redistricting commissions and ban partisan gerrymanders. They opted not to. And it was them unto themselves by fiat who decided to redraw Texas and Missouri and North Carolina. This is a response to Republican overreach. And so the goal here is not just to seek out good government solutions, because that ship has sailed. We're not in that world anymore. The goal now has to be to neutralize these blatant power grabs that are happening at the hands of Republicans.
Right. And to that point, I mean, just to put this in perspective, you know, a 10-1 map in Virginia would not be as egregious as what Republicans are doing in North Carolina or what they did in Missouri. Like, you know, even a 4-seat would not be, it would be, you know, it would be on par with sort of what Gavin Newsom has done in California, where you could eke out a little bit more. But you know, it's an aggressive map, but it's not a crazy, it's not like you look at it visually, the map would look just normal. So I hope they do the 4 seats.
And I would also note for any of the incumbents who are looking to maximize their advantage in that state, you know, you don't need to win your district by 40 points. You don't need to win your district by 30 points. You don't need to win it by 20 or 15 or 10. If you can give up a little bit of your district and still have a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 point margin, D plus 10 in your district, and it would mean that you have a bigger delegation and you can do a service to democracy by helping push back against this Republican power grab, then do that. This is not about making sure that you are in the most comfortable position. This is about making sure that democracy can stand in light of the threats that we're contending with right now. You know, there were a lot of lawmakers in California who gave up a lot of their districts. Robert Garcia, for example, basically put himself into a swing state in deference to other potential Democrats who will now likely be part of this delegation out in California. And so this is a moment to be selfless in deference to democracy and not make sure that you have a cushy ride to a D plus 30 seat in an election where we need as many people to serve as a bulwark against the Republicans as we possibly can.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned it, because you know you've of course, as usual, put your finger on what I was more indirectly referencing, which is the preferences of members of Congress for, you know, how much of a cushion they have. I mean, right now, if you look at the current map, you have a D plus 18 seat, a D plus 17 seat, a D plus 26 seat, a D plus 18 seat, a D plus 6, a D plus 6 seat. So you've got a lot of Democratic seats that are pretty, you know, that are pretty well insulated. And that's why I say it would not be an extreme gerrymander by any stretch of the imagination to push more of, you know, to draw these maps in a way that would create more Democratic seats. Because if you look at the Republicans, they are sitting in like R plus 3. Correct. Even, you know, like these Republican districts are really on the edge, because it is really fundamentally a Democratic state. It's not like North Carolina.
Right. Well, of course, again, for anybody who's watching, Mark has been an outspoken champion for this issue in particular, and this is the issue that is foundational. Republicans are trying to entrench a House majority that will never that will never subside, and I think that it's incumbent on us to be as loud as possible in pushing back against that. There's no better voice on that front than Mark. So a small step we can all take to support his work and elevate that voice is to sign up for Democracy Docket. So I'm going to put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Mark Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.